5 minutes before I was supposed to walk down the aisle, my groom disappeared. Not late. Not stuck in traffic. Not hiding in the groom's suite with cold feet and a glass of bourbon. Gone. His tuxedo was still hanging on the back of a chair. His watch was still on the vanity. His phone charger was still plugged into the wall. But Nathan Brooks, the man I had spent 3 years loving, funding, defending, and preparing to marry in front of half of New York's business elite, had vanished from the 29th floor of the Aurelia Hotel. And he had left me a note. The Aurelia belonged to my family. It stood above Central Park like a glass crown, all pale marble, champagne roses, custom lighting, and quiet money. That morning, the entire top floor had been closed for my wedding reception. Florists had worked through the night. Security had locked down the elevators. Reporters were waiting behind barricades downstairs, hoping for a glimpse of the Hawthorne heiress marrying the self-made real estate founder everyone had suddenly decided was the next big thing. That was the headline they expected. Claire Hawthorne marries Nathan Brooks. Hawthorne Group and Brooks Development announce a new era. No one expected the groom to run away before the first toast. My father had built Hawthorne Group from a respected regional hotel business into a national hospitality and commercial real estate empire. I had grown up inside boardrooms and ballroom foyers, learning how to smile while listening, how to negotiate without raising my voice, and how to never let a room see me bleed. By 28, I was managing our luxury travel and mixed-use development division. I knew numbers, contracts, reputations, and the kind of men who mistook a woman's calmness for weakness. Apparently, I had not known Nathan. When I first met him, Brooks Development was barely breathing. Nathan was handsome in an earnest, polished way, with the kind of smile that made investors feel as if they had discovered him before anyone else did. He was ambitious, articulate, and always just desperate enough to seem hungry instead of reckless. His company had a few promising projects in Brooklyn and Queens, but the foundation was thin, the cash flow was fragile, and the industry's old families did not take him seriously. I did. That was my first mistake. When his bridge loan fell through and Brooks Development was weeks away from collapse, I convinced my father to release emergency capital from one of Hawthorne's dormant investment accounts. At the exchange rate I used for the conversion, the old figure from the original paperwork came to roughly $1.5 million. That money kept his company alive. When Nathan offended a lender at a private dinner, I repaired the relationship. When he lost a zoning connection, I made the introduction that reopened the door. When he felt small beside men with family names engraved on buildings, I dimmed my own light so he could stand taller. At galas, I let him tell stories as if he had fought every battle alone. In meetings, I praised him before anyone could question him. Behind closed doors, I swallowed his moods, his pride, his fragile temper, because I thought love meant protecting the person you chose. For 3 years, I gave him my loyalty. For 3 years, he gave me the performance of devotion. The guests seated beneath the Aurelia's crystal chandeliers did not know any of that. They saw a beautiful wedding, a merger of influence, a young couple whose photographs would look perfect in every society column. My mother was in pale silver silk, already emotional. My father stood near the aisle, his expression composed, but his eyes softened every time he looked at me. My bridesmaids kept adjusting the train of my gown and whispering that I looked like something out of a movie. I smiled because that was what brides were supposed to do. But under the lace veil, a strange unease kept pressing against my ribs. My eyes drifted across the ballroom and stopped at the far end of the VIP section. Elliot Vale was sitting alone. He should not have looked out of place in a room full of billionaires, senators, developers, bankers, and old family money, but he did. Not because he was less powerful than them. Because he was more controlled. More distant. More impossible to read. Vale Holdings was the one company Nathan hated more than any other. Elliot had outbid him, outmaneuvered him, and outclassed him in nearly every major commercial real estate battle in the city. Nathan could not hear Elliot's name without his jaw tightening. He called him cold, arrogant, born lucky, even though everyone knew Elliot had taken a struggling family office and turned it into one of the sharpest investment firms in the country before he was 35. My parents had invited him out of courtesy. Hawthorne Group had overlapping interests with Vale Holdings, and in our world courtesy was never just courtesy. Still, I had expected him to send a gift and stay away. Instead, he had come in person. He wore a black tailored suit, no flashy watch, no unnecessary entourage. A half-full glass of red wine rested between his fingers. People approached him, bowed their heads slightly, tried to start conversations. He answered with a nod, a sentence, sometimes nothing more. But whenever I looked his way, his gaze was already on me. Not predatory. Not amused. Concerned. That unsettled me more than anything else. Before I could make sense of it, the host stepped onto the stage and lifted his microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please rise as we welcome today's groom, Mr. Nathan Brooks." The music swelled. The doors at the end of the aisle opened. Warm gold light hit the empty entrance. Everyone turned. 10 seconds passed. Then 30. Then a full minute. The music looped awkwardly. The applause thinned, then died. The entrance remained empty. No groom. No footsteps. No charming smile. No Nathan. Whispers spread faster than flame. Where is he? Did the schedule change? Is this some kind of surprise? My maid of honor, Megan, went pale beside me. My mother gripped the edge of her clutch so tightly her knuckles blanched. My father leaned toward his assistant and spoke in a voice low enough that only the front row could hear. "Find him. Now." Staff members scattered through the service doors. They searched the groom's suite, the private lounge, the corridor, the elevators, the terrace, the stairwell. The ballroom waited. Hundreds of eyes turned toward me, pretending not to stare while doing nothing else. Pity is loud when it tries to be quiet. After 5 minutes that felt like an hour, 2 hotel managers returned with faces as white as the roses lining the aisle. "Mr. Hawthorne," one of them said, swallowing hard. "Miss Hawthorne. Mr. Brooks is not on the floor. His belongings are still in the suite, but he is gone." The ballroom erupted. My father's face darkened. Nathan's relatives shrank in their chairs. My heart did not break all at once. It went cold first, as if my body knew humiliation was coming before my mind could accept it. "Did he leave anything?" I asked. The manager hesitated, then handed me a folded sheet of hotel stationery. I knew Nathan's handwriting before I saw the signature. The words were rushed, uneven, almost childish in their cowardice. "Claire, I'm sorry. I thought I could go through with this, but I can't lie to you or to myself anymore. Vanessa and I never really ended. She is the woman I have always loved. I'm leaving with her. I'll reimburse the wedding costs. Please don't look for me. Vanessa Clark." His childhood sweetheart. His bold friend. The woman whose name had appeared too often on his phone, always explained away with a laugh, a sigh, a story about history and loyalty and how I had nothing to worry about. So that was what I had been. Not a fiancé. Not a partner. Not the woman he intended to build a life with. A bridge. I had been the money that saved him, the name that opened doors, the polished woman who made him look legitimate until he could stand high enough to choose someone else publicly. He had taken my resources with one hand and held Vanessa with the other. Then, on the day he was supposed to marry me, he had decided to turn my wedding into his exit scene. Everyone waited for me to collapse. They expected tears, a trembling apology, perhaps a graceful cancellation that would still leave the Hawthorne family bleeding dignity across a ballroom floor. They expected my father to make a statement, my mother to escort me away, and Nathan Brooks to become the tragic romantic who followed his heart. I folded the note once. Then again. I slipped it into the hidden pocket sewn into my gown. My hands stopped shaking. Why should I be the one to run? Why should my family lower our heads because a man with no honor had abandoned a room full of witnesses? Why should Nathan get to make me the punchline of his cowardice? I lifted my eyes. Across the ballroom, Elliot Vale had not moved. He was still watching me, but the concern in his eyes had sharpened into something else. Something steady. Something that looked almost like readiness. Nathan hated him. Nathan feared him. Nathan had spent years measuring himself against Elliot Vale and coming up short every time. A thought entered my mind with such clarity that it felt less like impulse than instinct. If Nathan had abandoned the role of groom in front of the city, then I would not cancel the wedding. I would replace him. I took the microphone from the frozen host's hand. A thin crackle of electricity ran through the speakers. The ballroom fell silent so completely I could hear the soft rush of the ventilation above the chandeliers. "Thank you all for coming today," I said. My voice sounded calm. That surprised even me. As many of you have noticed, the ceremony has not begun as scheduled. Nathan Brooks, the original groom, has chosen to leave the hotel and abandon this wedding. A wave of shock moved through the room. Nathan's aunt gasped. A developer in the second row leaned toward his wife. My mother covered her mouth, but she did not stop me. I looked directly at Nathan's relatives. He left a letter stating that he has gone to be with another woman. This time the whispers were not soft. They were sharp, delighted, hungry. I let them rise for 2 seconds. Then I cut through them. But Hawthorne weddings do not end because a man loses his nerve. The room stilled. The legal marriage license cannot be altered in the middle of a ceremony, and I will not pretend otherwise. The paperwork will be handled properly later. But today, in front of our families, our friends, and our business community, this public ceremony will continue. My father's eyes narrowed, not in anger now, but in attention. I turned toward the VIP table. Only the groom is changing. People began to stand. Someone said, "No." Someone else said, "She wouldn't." I raised my hand and pointed across the room. "Mr. Elliot Vale, chairman of Vale Holdings, I ask you to take the groom's place and complete this ceremony with me." The ballroom exploded. The noise was instant and violent. Chairs scraped. Glasses clinked. Nathan's relatives shot to their feet, red-faced and furious. "Claire Hawthorne, this is obscene." Nathan's uncle shouted. "Marriage is not a business stunt." I looked at him. "Tell that to the man who used my family's name to fund his company, then ran away with another woman before the vows." His mouth opened, then closed. Megan grabbed my wrist and whispered, "Claire, are you sure? Elliot doesn't have to help us. He could embarrass you even more." She was right. Elliot could refuse. He could remain seated, offer a cold smile, and watch Nathan Brooks destroy himself without lifting a finger. He would lose nothing. In fact, he would gain. Brooks' development would be mocked, Hawthorne Group would be wounded, and Vale Holdings would remain untouched above the mess. Every rational person in that ballroom believed he would say no. For 3 seconds, he did not move. Then Elliot set down his glass. The soft sound of crystal against linen carried through the room as if amplified. He rose slowly, buttoned his jacket, and stepped away from his table. No hesitation. No performance. Just decision. The crowd parted before him. Conversations died row by row as he walked toward me. In his black suit, under all that gold light, he looked less like a guest than a verdict. When he reached the foot of the stage, he looked up at me, and for the first time that day, the world around me seemed to quiet for a reason other than humiliation. "I accept," he said. 2 words. They rewrote the entire room. He climbed the steps and stopped in front of me. Then he offered his hand. "Claire Hawthorne," he said softly, but the microphone still caught enough for the front rows to hear, if he was too much of a coward to stand beside you, I will. My throat tightened. Today, I will protect your dignity. Tomorrow, if you still want me there, I'll protect everything else. I placed my hand in his. His palm was warm. His grip was firm but gentle. Not possessive. Not theatrical. Just steady. The ballroom remained stunned for several heartbeats, and then my father began to clap. It was not loud at first. One clean sound. Then another. My mother joined him. Then a senior banker in the front row. Then a hotel investor. Then the entire room, because people with power know when the wind has changed. The host recovered quickly. That was why my mother had hired him. He stepped forward with a bright, almost breathless smile. Ladies and gentlemen, in an unexpected turn of fate, today's ceremony continues with Ms. Claire Hawthorne and Mr. Elliot Vale. The music began again, slower this time. Less like a fairy tale. More like a coronation. Elliot walked with me to the center of the stage. He noticed my long train before I did and slowed his pace. Careful, he murmured. The lace is catching near your heel. One sentence. One quiet piece of attention. It should not have mattered as much as it did. Nathan had spent 3 years standing beside me at galas, conferences, ribbon cuttings, charity dinners, and political fundraisers. He had never once noticed when my dress snagged, when my shoes hurt, when I was cornered by a man who spoke over me, when my smile had turned into endurance. He noticed only whether I made him look good. Elliot noticed the hem of my gown in the middle of a scandal. There were no rings prepared for him. Of course there were not. For one absurd second, the officiant froze, unsure how to proceed. Elliot simply removed the ring from his own right hand. It was a simple platinum band, understated and expensive in the way truly expensive things rarely announce themselves. "This will do for today," he said. He took my left hand and slid the ring onto my finger. It fit. A faint ripple moved through the room. I looked at the ring, then at him. His expression did not change, but his eyes softened. "I'll replace it with the one you deserve," he said. "This is only the beginning." I should have been too angry to be moved. Too humiliated to feel anything but survival. Instead, something warm and dangerous opened in my chest. We did not lie to the guests and pretend the civil paperwork had magically changed. The officiant adjusted the words. It became a public commitment ceremony, a declaration, a promise in front of the people whose opinions shaped half the city's deals. The legal certificate would be filed later, properly, cleanly, with both signatures where they belonged. But in that ballroom, the meaning was already clear. Nathan Brooks had thrown away the bride who built him. Elliot Vale had stepped into the place Nathan abandoned. And every person watching understood the difference. When it came time for the reception speech, Elliot took the microphone. He did not posture. He did not gloat. That made what he said even more lethal. "Today, I am honored to stand beside Claire Hawthorne," he began. "Not because of circumstance, but because I have always respected her integrity, her intelligence, and her ability to build without destroying." The room listened. Hawthorne Group and Vale Holdings will move forward with a strategic partnership across hospitality, urban redevelopment, and mixed-use commercial projects. Our teams have already explored the terms. After today, those discussions will accelerate. My father looked at him sharply. So did I. Already explored? Elliot continued, voice even and cool. Business is built on trust. Contracts matter. Capital matters. But none of it survives without character. Vale Holdings does not invest in people who abandon obligations when the room is watching, nor in those who exploit goodwill until it no longer serves them. No one missed the target. Nathan's relatives looked as if they wanted the marble floor to swallow them. The applause that followed was not polite. It was strategic. People were aligning themselves in real time. By the time Elliot lowered the microphone, the embarrassment had moved off my shoulders and settled squarely on the Brooks family. The rest of the ceremony unfolded with a surreal smoothness. We cut the cake. We took photographs. We accepted congratulations that began as awkward and grew warmer as the story settled into its new shape. Elliot handled every conversation I was too exhausted to face. He intercepted probing questions. He thanked older guests. He accepted jokes with a faint smile. He never let go of my hand unless he had to. I had spent 3 years making Nathan look powerful. In one afternoon, Elliot made me feel protected. During a brief break behind the stage, away from the cameras and the guests, I finally turned to him. "Why did you do that?" He looked at me as if the question had far more history than I understood. "Because you asked." That isn't an answer. It's the simplest one. You risked your reputation, your company's position, and a public fight with Brooks Development because a woman you barely know asked you to replace her runaway groom. His gaze held mine. "I know you better than you think." Before I could respond, the ballroom doors slammed open. "Claire." Nathan's voice cut through the softened music like glass across stone. Every head turned. He stood at the entrance, soaked from the evening rain, hair disheveled, tuxedo wrinkled, face twisted with fury. The charming founder, the tender fiancé, the polished man the city had praised that morning gone. In his place was something raw, jealous, and ugly. His eyes found my hand in Elliot's. He went still for half a second. Then rage took over. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, storming forward. "I leave for a few hours and you put him in my place." The ballroom quieted again, but this time the silence did not belong to my humiliation. It belonged to his. I stepped away from Elliot, but he moved with me, half a pace behind, close enough to shield me if Nathan lunged. Nathan pointed at him. "You planned this. Both of you. You were waiting for me to make one mistake so you could crawl into my wedding and steal what was mine." A laugh almost escaped me. "What was yours?" He flinched. I reached into the pocket of my gown and unfolded his note. "This is your handwriting." His face paled. "You wrote that you could not marry me because Vanessa was the woman you always loved. You wrote that you were leaving with her. You wrote that I should not look for you." I held up the letter so the nearest guests could see it. A murmur rolled outward. "You did not make one mistake, Nathan. You made a choice. You abandoned your fiancé, your guests, your family, and your business partners on the most public day possible. You left me to absorb the shame you created. And now you have come back because the story did not end with me crying in a hallway." His jaw worked. "Claire," I was confused. "Vanessa showed up and I..." "Stop." My voice was not loud, but it landed hard enough that he closed his mouth. "For 3 years, I carried you. When your company was about to fold, my family's money saved it. When lenders refused your calls, I made introductions. When you offended partners, I repaired the damage. When you felt inferior beside Elliot Vale, I protected your ego so carefully I almost forgot I had one of my own." People were no longer whispering. They were listening. "I gave you access, credibility, patience, and love. You repaid me by using my family's name while keeping another woman in your bed and in your future." Nathan's eyes darted around the room. He saw the disgust forming and panicked. "That's not fair," he said quickly. "You knew I had history with Vanessa. You said you understood. And you and Vale don't pretend this is innocent. No woman asks a man like him to step in unless something was already going on." It was a desperate turn. A dirty one. But desperate men often reach for dirt. Elliot stepped forward. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Choose your next words carefully," he said. Nathan's face twisted. "Or what? You'll buy another judge? Crush another competitor? You've wanted what I had for years. Elliot's expression did not move. What you had, he said, was borrowed credibility. Nathan lunged toward me then, not far, just enough for Elliot's hand to close around his wrist. The movement was quick and controlled. Nathan hissed in pain. "Do not touch her," Elliot said. A security guard moved closer. My father did not stop him. Elliot released Nathan only when he stepped back. Then Elliot nodded to one of his assistants. The large screen behind the stage changed. A folder opened. Documents appeared. Emails. Transfer records. Hotel receipts. Internal memos. Screenshots. Security footage from the Aurelia's underground garage showing Nathan and Vanessa leaving together less than 20 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, his arm around her waist, her face lifted toward his. The room inhaled as one body. Nathan stared at the screen as if it had betrayed him personally. Elliot's voice remained calm. Over the last year, Brooks Development used Hawthorne introductions to approach partners under false pretenses. It copied confidential project materials, repackaged them, and circulated them through third parties. It redirected potential contracts meant for joint review. It accepted private benefits while representing itself as aligned with Hawthorne Group. Another file opened. Personal transfers to Vanessa Clark. Shared hotel stays. Private leases. Travel records. None of this concerns me morally, Mr. Brooks, until you used it to deceive your fiancé, exploit her company, and manipulate the market. Nathan's lips parted, but no sound came out. I looked at the screen, then at Elliot. He had not gathered this in the last hour. This had taken time. Quiet surveillance. Legal review. Patience. He had known. Or at least suspected enough to prepare. My anger sharpened into something clean. From this moment, I said, turning toward Nathan, Hawthorne Group is withdrawing every pending support structure connected to Brooks Development. Any partnership built on my family's access ends today. Elliot lifted the microphone. Vale Holdings will do the same. Any vendor or investor currently reviewing Brooks Development materials should speak to counsel before continuing. Evidence of misappropriated commercial information will be submitted to the proper authorities. That was not a threat. It was a death sentence in legal language. Nathan understood. His arrogance broke apart in front of us. "Claire," he said, voice cracking. "Please. Don't let him do this. This is business. What happened between us is personal." "No," I said. "You made it business the day you used my name to build your company." He took a step toward me, softer now, desperate. I was scared. Vanessa was familiar. "I made a mistake. But I love you. You know I love you. We can still fix this. Tell him to stop and I'll marry you right now. We'll do it properly. We'll forget this happened." For a moment, the room seemed to hold its breath. I looked at the man I had once defended against everyone's doubts. I felt nothing. "That is the problem, Nathan," I said. "You still think marriage to me is something you can pick up when you need it." His face crumpled. I lifted my hand, the platinum ring catching the chandelier light. "You left the bride. Someone else stood beside her." The ceremony continued. The business world saw the truth. You are not the groom anymore. You are evidence. The word struck harder than shouting. Nathan's pride did not survive them. He cursed then. At me. At Elliot. At the guests. At the security team that moved in when his voice became too loud and his body too unpredictable. His mother cried into a napkin. His uncle tried to argue with my father and failed. Within minutes, Nathan Brooks was escorted from the Aurelia Hotel, still shouting that he would not be ruined by me. The doors closed behind him. For the first time all day, I breathed. The guests left soon after. Some approached to offer sincere apologies. Some offered support because they had calculated the new balance of power. In my world, those two things often wore the same suit. My parents stayed until the last important guest was gone. My mother hugged me tightly, careful not to crush the gown. "You were magnificent," she whispered, and there was grief under the pride. My father placed his hand on my shoulder. "I should have listened to my instincts about him sooner." "So should I," I said. "No," he answered. "You loved honestly. That is not a flaw. His failure to deserve it is not your shame." After they left, the ballroom felt enormous. The flowers were still perfect. The cake had been cut. The champagne flutes still caught the light. Everything looked like a wedding after the guests leave, except my entire life had been rearranged in the middle of it. My knees nearly gave out. Elliot caught me at the waist before I fell. "Easy," he said. "I'm fine." "No, you're standing. Those are different things." A laugh escaped me then, small and exhausted. It startled both of us. He guided me to a chair near the stage and knelt, not dramatically, not like a proposal, but simply so I would not have to look up. "You handled a room full of predators with a broken heart," he said. "You're allowed to be tired." I looked at him, really looked. "Why did you have all that evidence?" He was quiet long enough that I knew the answer would matter. "Because I've been watching Brooks for years." "Because he was your rival?" "At first." "And later?" His gaze dropped briefly to the ring on my hand. "Because he was standing beside you." The words landed softly, but the meaning behind them was not soft at all. "I don't understand," I said. "I know." He stood and offered his hand again. I took it. He helped me up, and we walked away from the stage, past the empty chairs and fallen rose petals, toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. The city glittered below us, indifferent and endless. "I met you 10 years ago," Elliot said. I frowned. "At the State Development Forum?" "You remember?" "I remember the forum. I don't remember meeting you." "We didn't meet. Not properly. You were 22. Hawthorne Group had just announced a waterfront renovation project, and half the men in that conference room treated you like a decorative spokesperson sent by your father. You stood at the podium and answered every question better than the consultants who wrote the proposal." The memory returned slowly. A brutal morning. A hostile panel. My first real public test. I was terrified, I admitted. "You looked fearless." I was not. That made it more impressive. I turned from the window. He was watching me with a kind of tenderness that made my chest ache. "That day," he said, "I thought, if the industry had any sense, they would be afraid of her." Despite myself, I smiled. "I followed your work after that," he continued. "Not publicly. Not in a way that would create rumors. I watched you build projects with restraint and taste. I watched you negotiate without humiliating people. I watched you protect your staff. I watched you make room at tables where men like Brooks only wanted to take up more space. And when I started dating Nathan..." His jaw tightened, barely. I hated it. The honesty surprised me. "But you never said anything." I had no right. "You looked happy. And if I had approached you while competing with him, anything I said would have seemed like strategy. I would not let my feelings become another pressure placed on you. So you stayed away." I stayed close enough to help when I could. I stared at him. A dozen memories rearranged themselves. A hostile investor who suddenly softened after a private call. A hotel union dispute that resolved before it became public. A financing complication that disappeared overnight. A smear campaign against one of my projects that lost momentum before it reached the press. You. Sometimes directly. Sometimes through people who owed me favors. I should have been angry. Maybe another woman would have been. But what I felt was the shock of being protected without being owned. For 10 years? I asked. For 10 years. My eyes burned. Nathan loved being seen loving me, I said quietly. You loved me where no one could see. Elliot's expression changed then. The control cracked just enough for longing to show through. I did not want today to happen this way, he said. I would have preferred you never be hurt at all. If Brooks had married you and treated you well, I would have stepped back forever. You would have let me go. I already had. The ache in that sentence was deeper than any confession. But when he left you standing in that room, Elliot continued, voice low, I could not stay seated. Not after 10 years of telling myself restraint was honorable. Not when restraint would have meant watching him destroy you publicly. I looked down at his ring on my finger. Was this planned? No. Prepared, maybe. Hoped for, never. I had evidence because Brooks was corrupt, not because I expected to marry you today. And the partnership with Hawthorne? Our teams had been circling each other for months. I planned to approach your father after the wedding, once you were not trapped in the optics of Brooks. I did not know your wedding would become the reason. I breathed out slowly. The room, the scandal, the humiliation, all of it felt suddenly less like the end of something and more like the violent clearing of space. My life changed in one afternoon, I said. So did mine. We stood in the golden quiet. Then my phone began to vibrate. At first, I ignored it. Then it kept buzzing. Texts. Alerts. Calls. News push notifications. I unlocked the screen. My name was trending. Not because the truth had come out. Because Nathan had started a war. Claire Hawthorne humiliates groom to marry billionaire rival. Hawthorne heiress accused of using wedding to force veil partnership. Sources say Nathan Brooks was pushed out after discovering fiancé's affair. I scrolled faster, blood cooling with every headline. Anonymous accounts claimed I had been involved with Elliot for months. Gossip blogs painted Nathan as a heartbroken man who had fled after learning I had betrayed him. Comment sections filled with strangers calling me ambitious, cold, shameless, a social climber, as if I could climb higher than the family name I was born into. Vanessa was already playing her part. A tearful post from a private account had been screenshotted and circulated. She wrote about truth, powerful families, and a man punished for choosing real love. Real love. I almost laughed. Elliot gently covered my phone with his hand. Don't feed yourself poison. It's them, I said. Nathan and Vanessa. They're trying to turn the public story before the evidence reaches anyone outside the room. Yes. His calmness steadied me. You expected this? I expected Brooks to lash out. I did not expect him to be smart about it. He isn't. Someone is advising him. Then we answer with facts. He called his chief of staff. His voice changed instantly, not louder, but sharper, stripped of every softness he had shown me. Release the evidence packet. Full timeline. Garage footage. Letter. Financial transfers. Hotel records. Misappropriation documents reviewed by counsel. Send takedown demands to every outlet running defamatory claims without verification. File preservation notices. Coordinate with Hawthorne Legal. I want the first corrected stories live in 10 minutes. He ended the call and looked at me. Your team should prepare a statement, but keep it short. No pleading. No emotion for public consumption. Truth, timeline, legal action. I was already typing. Within minutes, Hawthorne Group released a formal statement. No melodrama. No personal insults. Just the facts. Nathan Brooks left the venue before the ceremony, provided a handwritten letter ending the engagement, and evidence of personal and commercial misconduct had been submitted to counsel. Then Vail Holdings released the packet. The internet loves a villain until a clearer villain appears. Security footage from the Aurelia garage showed Nathan leaving with Vanessa before the ceremony. The timestamp destroyed his claim. His letter destroyed his victim act. The transfer records destroyed Vanessa's innocent old friend performance. The leaked project files destroyed what remained of Brooks Development's credibility. The reversal was brutal. Brooks Development founder exposed after wedding scandal. Vanessa Clark named in years-long affair. Hawthorne and Vail legal teams review alleged commercial misconduct. Apologies appeared from people who had been calling me shameless 15 minutes earlier. Influencers deleted posts. Business reporters pivoted with humiliating speed. The same public that had tried to burn me now demanded Nathan's head. In corporate circles, the impact was faster and colder. Investors withdrew pending calls. Lenders froze credit reviews. Partners requested audits. A commercial bank issued a notice. By midnight, Brooks Development's projected valuation had been slashed so sharply that analysts estimated hundreds of millions of dollars in market value had been wiped out across pending deals, assets, and future financing prospects. Nathan had not just lost me. He had lost the illusion that he had ever stood on his own. Vanessa left him before dawn. I found out from a recording someone sent to Megan, who sent it to me only after asking whether I was stable enough to laugh. Vanessa's voice came through sharp and furious. You have nothing now, Nathan. No company, no investors, no wedding, no future. I didn't come back for debt and lawsuits. I came back because you said you were finally powerful enough to choose me. Nathan's response was muffled. Then she said the sentence that ended whatever fantasy he had burned his life down for. You ruined yourself. Don't drag me into it. The recording spread by morning. Maybe Vanessa leaked it. Maybe Nathan did. Maybe the universe had a sense of humor. Either way, the city heard the truth. He had abandoned the woman who built him for a woman who abandoned him the moment he fell. That should have been the end. It was not. Men like Nathan do not always understand consequences. Sometimes they mistake consequences for enemies. 2 nights after the wedding, Elliot's security chief flagged unusual activity. Nathan had liquidated what remained of his personal accounts, sold a car, and withdrawn cash. He had been seen near one of Hawthorne Group's residential properties, then near the private garage beneath my apartment building. Elliot called me before I could leave the office. Do not drive yourself tonight. I have security. You have my security now. I don't want to live as if he controls my movements. You won't, he said. But pride is not a protection plan. I hated that he was right. A black SUV collected me from Hawthorne headquarters. Elliot was inside, still in his suit, sleeves unbuttoned at the wrist, phone in hand. He looked tired. He also looked like a man who had already mapped every possible threat and decided how each one would end. You didn't have to come yourself, I said. Yes, I did. The convoy pulled away from the curb and entered the wet shine of midtown traffic. Rain streaked the windows. Neon signs blurred into color. For a few minutes, the city felt almost peaceful. Then a black sedan shot out from a side street. It came too fast, angled directly toward us. The driver reacted before I understood what was happening. Our SUV swerved with controlled violence. Another security vehicle slid between us and the sedan. Tires screamed. Metal slammed. The impact was heavy but contained, redirected away from our passenger door. My hand flew to the seat. Elliot's arm came across me, bracing without crushing. The sedan spun and stopped near the curb. Nathan was behind the wheel. Even through the rain-streaked glass, I could see his face. Wild. Hollow. Unrecognizable. The face of a man who had lost the story he told himself and blamed everyone except the author. Security moved in seconds. Doors opened. Men in dark coats pulled him from the car as he struggled and shouted. Elliot lowered the window just enough for his voice to carry. Nathan's eyes snapped toward us. "You took everything from me," he screamed. "Both of you." Elliot looked at him with no anger at all. Somehow that was more devastating. "No," he said. "You traded everything you had for a lie, and the lie left you when the bill came due." Nathan fought harder, but the fight was already gone. Police sirens approached. Rain soaked his ruined suit. His mouth moved, but the words dissolved into the noise of the city. I watched him and felt the last thread of grief break. Not because I hated him. Because I finally understood he had never been the man I mourned. The Nathan I loved had been a role. A performance tailored to my hope. The real Nathan was standing in the rain, furious that the world had refused to let him betray people without cost. Police took him that night. Dangerous driving, attempted assault, harassment, commercial misconduct, and the growing pile of evidence from both legal teams ensured he would not return to my door. Brooks Development entered formal collapse soon after. Assets were frozen. Offices emptied. Former employees cooperated with investigators faster than anyone expected, perhaps because loyalty fades quickly when paychecks stop. Vanessa disappeared from the city's social scene within a week. The women who had once tolerated her because Nathan looked useful no longer answered her messages. Her brand deals vanished. Her apartment lease became a problem. She had wanted the life Nathan promised her. She had not wanted Nathan. In the end, they gave each other exactly what they deserved. As for me, I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt clean. There is a kind of peace that comes only after the worst thing happens and you realize you survived it with your spine intact. I returned to work. I answered emails. I sat across from legal counsel and signed documents. I met with my father and Elliot's team to formalize the Hawthorne Vale partnership. The numbers made sense. The strategy made sense. The timing, though born from chaos, was perfect. But the partnership was not what changed me. Elliot did. He did not rush me. He did not claim me because he had stood beside me in public. He did not use the scandal as proof that I owed him affection. He simply remained present. He sent coffee before early meetings and marked the cup with no message, only my preferred order. He remembered which journalists made me tense and stepped into interviews before they could corner me. He asked for my opinion in rooms where others assumed he would lead. When people congratulated him for saving me, he corrected them every time. Claire saved herself, he would say. I only took the place she offered. That mattered. More than the ring. More than the speeches. More than the headlines. A few weeks after the Aurelia scandal, he asked me to meet him at a small estate in Connecticut owned by neither of our families. No press. No investors. No ballroom full of people measuring every glance. Just a garden, a string quartet, my parents, his mother, Megan, and a judge who checked every line of the marriage license twice. This time, nothing was improvised. This time, no one ran. Elliot stood beneath an arch of white roses in a dark blue suit, looking at me as if the 10 years behind us and the lifetime ahead of us had folded into one quiet moment. I wore a simple silk dress. No heavy train. No armor disguised as lace. When I reached him, he took my hands. 10 years ago, he said, I watched you stand in a room that wanted to underestimate you. I thought I admired you then. I was wrong. Admiration was only the beginning. His voice lowered. I have loved you in silence, respected you from a distance, and protected you when I had no right to ask for anything in return. Today, I am done standing at a distance. If you will have me, I will spend the rest of my life beside you, not in front of you, not behind you. Beside you. The judge smiled. My mother cried. My father pretended not to. I looked at Elliot, at the man who had waited without pressuring, protected without possessing, and stepped forward only when I asked. I spent 3 years mistaking need for love, I said. I thought devotion meant making myself smaller so someone else could feel tall. You taught me that real love does not shrink a woman. It steadies her. It sees her clearly and still chooses to stay. His eyes shone. So yes, I said. I will have you beside me. When he placed the new ring on my finger, it did not erase what had happened at the Aurelia. Nothing could, and I no longer wanted it to. The betrayal, the humiliation, the public fight, the rain-slicked street where my past tried one last time to crash into my future, all of it had burned away the life I thought I wanted and revealed the one I was strong enough to claim. Nathan Brooks had left me at the altar believing he had ruined me. Instead, he made room for the man who had loved me properly long before I knew his heart existed. The city would remember the scandal. The headlines would fade into archives. Brooks' development would become a cautionary tale told over expensive lunches. Vanessa would become a name people lowered their voices around before forgetting altogether. But I would remember something else. The moment I stood in a ballroom with every eye waiting for me to break, and chose not to. The moment I pointed across the room and asked the one man Nathan feared to stand beside me. The moment Elliot Vale rose without hesitation. Some endings arrive dressed as disasters. Mine wore a wedding gown, held a folded note, and learned that being abandoned by the wrong man can be the first step toward being chosen by the right one.